Hello friends, very welcome to my channel, The Vibepreneur, where we do vibe coding and build AI automation workflows using N8N. So today we'll be building automation workflow using N8N. So before I start sharing my screen, I want to request you that if you have any questions, you have any doubts, any thoughts you want to share, or just in general chat about anything, you can chat with me live because it's a live session, and you can use the chat window to chat with me. Okay, so let me start today's session, which is an automation workshop for building N8N workflows. So this is how a N8N a freshly installed N8N looks like, right? By the way, I'm using a custom deployed, or rather self-hosted N8N. Okay, it is deployed on my Google Cloud. You can go to N8N website itself, and you'll get, I think, a 15-day trial where you can use their own cloud-hosted version of N8N. And also N8N is a fair code used software, so it's not open source. It's called fair code use, which you can install locally, right? So you have all the code available on the GitHub. You can install it locally, run it locally, and even use it locally. But there are certain limitations when using it locally. For example, you cannot connect any webhooks with it, or you cannot, trigger your automations via webhooks, right? So that is one limitation. So for that, I have self-deployed or self-hosted this custom N8N version so that I can use webhooks and everything. And by the way, this is only for personal use, right? Because as per the N8N's license agreement, nobody can sell the N8N as it is for anyone else to use it. It is against their usage policy. That's why it is not open source. It is fair code usage based. Anyways, so and because it is my first live stream of sharing N8N workflow, although I have already shared few videos of N8N workflows on my same channel, but considering it is the first live stream for especially for building N8N workflows, so I want to cover a little bit of basics, because those of you who joins me for this live stream, right? So I just want to cover some quick basics before we start building today's workflow. Okay, so again, as I was mentioning, this is a freshly installed N8N, right? So the main thing what we do on N8N is create workflow, right? So we have this orange button here where we can click to start creating a new workflow. And if you have already created some earlier workflows, they will get listed here. For example, you can see one workflow which I created like 2 weeks back for some Instagram related automation. So that workflow is listed. So likewise, if you create more workflows, they will get listed here, right? So, and here is some sort of a dashboard where it shows some basic stats about how many workflows you have running in production, how many failed execution, and things like that, right? So let's start with creating a very basic workflow so I can share with you like how this inside UI works, right? So here we have the editor of creating an N8N workflow, right? And they have actually done a good job over the UI. Of course, it has improved over the period of time, but finally they have reached to a decent UI. And as you can see at the center here, right, they've given you a very telling plus icon with a very clear instruction, add first step, right? So as soon as you land here, you don't get confused and you have this plus button and you just click on this, right? Now after you do that, they have tried to make it like a very it's like an onboarding thing, right? And they have tried to make it very user friendly, and that they have tried to build it very user friendly. So it says what triggers this workflow. A trigger is a step that starts your workflow, right? So any N8N workflow, right, needs a trigger. Imagine your workflow is like an engine, and that engine needs to be started, right? So you can either kickstart, like manually start this engine, right? Or you can self-start it, right? With the help of a battery and a motor, right? So likewise, like kind of using the same analogy, we have various ways to start our workflow, right? Manually, okay? Based on some event from any app like Telegram or Notion or Airtable and such, right? On a schedule, right? Imagine you have some sort of a workflow which has to run like every morning at 9 a.m., right? Or every evening at 6 p.m., right? Or like every hour, right? So these kind of schedules can be set to trigger these workflows. Then there is a webhook call where your N8N system, right, will receive a webhook, which is essentially a network call, right? When it comes to it, it can also trigger your workflow, right? On form submission. So form submission is actually a very specific case of a webhook call, right? So in form submission, you also get some sort of a UI of a form, okay? But when somebody enters or submit that form, it eventually calls the webhook only, and all the form data is sent along with the webhook. So forms are a specific kind of webhooks, right? And also you can have a parent workflow which can trigger some child workflows. So imagine you have some very complex workflow which has various conditions, and based on certain condition you want to trigger a child workflow, a sub workflow, you can do that, right? On a chat message. So within this editor window itself, right, some workflows can be triggered if you add a chat interface, right? So you can just trigger the workflow over the chat, and I guess today we'll be doing that. Today we'll be using the chat interface to trigger our workflow. Okay, and then there are a bunch of them like file changes and things, right? So as I just discussed, today we'll be triggering a workflow based on a chat. Okay, so we'll click on this button on chat message. As soon as I click it, it's going to add some additional UI onto this editor. Okay, let's see that. So I clicked it here. First of all, it opened another dialog, right? Which is in our case actually has nothing that matters to us. So we can just click on this back to canvas. Okay, now we have got this component, right? Or it's actually a trigger. Okay, so this is a trigger which is based on a chat, right? And see this, we have got a chat interface as well. Okay, so you see this this power symbol, that orange color power symbol, right? This power symbol means it's a trigger, right? So there is a trigger for webhook and form, right? So those also get this kind of power symbol. That means this is a trigger, and so this is a chat trigger. Okay, now this is just a trigger, right? But we need to have a workflow, right? As I was describing, so there is like a start, right? For example, your workflow is an engine, so it has to do certain thing, right? Certain work it has to perform, and then you trigger it. So we just have a trigger. Now let's add a very small, like a minimal kind of a workflow. Okay, so I'll again click on this plus sign here, right? Because as you can see, there was already a plus sign attached to it, and it kind of tells, if you click this plus sign, yeah, right, something else you can add here, right? This kind of a user experience which they are trying to make it easy. Okay, so if I click this plus sign, Now I'm going to use something very, very basic just to demonstrate this N8N editor, right? I'll click on data transformation, okay? And I'll click on this edit fields, right? And I'll click here. And for our use case, I'll just close it, okay? Now just these two things, right? So as you can see, there are two things here, right? One is this chat and one is this pencil icon edit field, right? These things are called nodes, okay? These are the nodes of our workflow. So our workflow right now have two nodes. One is a trigger node and another is this edit field node, right? So we have these two nodes, and with this we have a very, very minimal, a basic kind of a workflow, okay? Now let's see how it works, right? Let's try to see how it works. So I'll click on I'll enter some chat here, and I guess my browser window is getting obstructed a little bit, so I'll just move it up a little bit. Yeah, okay. So let's enter a chat here, and like any general chat, let's say hi. Okay. Now a bunch of things happen, right? If I was not if I was not on a live stream, I could have maybe slowed it down and showed you like what everything is there, but a bunch of things happen. The first of all, as soon as I pressed enter after writing this chat, I had pressed this send icon, right? We received a notification, okay, and then our nodes have become green, right? So first of all, if all the nodes have become green, right, that means our workflow has run successfully, okay? There was no error and it has completed successfully, and each and every node has turned green, means each and every node has ran successfully. There are cases where some node may run successfully and the next node may fail, right? But in this case, all the nodes have run successfully, okay? So now let's ignore the bottom things, right? Let's see what happened within our workflow. So we have these two nodes, right? And I want to see what happened within this particular node, because it was a trigger, right? So this is where sort of the entry point of our workflow was, right? As I mentioned, the workflow, which is the engine, it needs a start, right? So our this message has actually started this workflow, triggered this workflow, right? So this is the first node which got executed, right? And then subsequent nodes gets executed based on this arrow sign here, right? But I want to see what happened within this node, so I'll just double click on it, okay? Now the very similar kind of interface got opened, which was there when I just added this chat trigger, right? But earlier it was sort of empty. This time it has some data within it, okay? So there are a few things here: session ID, action, and something called chat input, right? So this is the data that this particular node received, right? When we sent this chat message and clicked send, so it received some data. This particular node received some data, and this is that data, right? Now, if among you there are programmers, so so there are a bunch of ways to visualize this data. One is schema, okay? But for programmers, they're more comfortable with something like JSON, right? Because when you create APIs, you often send data in JSON format, right? So this is that same data in JSON, and see, it has that JSON structure, an object with keys and values, right? Now there is one very interesting key which is called chat input, and it has the exact same text, the message that we had entered, right? So if we want to use this particular text or this particular message in our next node, or any node further down the chain, right? So it sort of built a chain of the nodes, right? So we can use this information, and I'll show you how we'll use this information but for the time being, just understand that we can use this information to receive that information that was sent within that workflow, right? Within that trigger node. Okay, so this is good. Right, so now let's see what happened in this node. Okay, so likewise, I'll just double click on this one. Right, now here this UI is a little different because this is for a different node, right? This is for the set field node. Now for now, let's not get into what is set field, what it does. That's not important right now. But what is important is looking at this side. Okay, just to give you a little bit of more understanding, if you see the how this UI is constructed, right? There is one box here, gray box, then there is one gray box here, right? And then in between there is another panel, right? And they have very neatly labeled this side of box as input and this side of box as output, right? So imagine within our workflow, within an N8N workflow, under each node, right? So workflow is an entire engine, but each node is like a sub part of that engine which does its own processing, which does its own small amount of work, right? So multiple nodes does their own part of work, and combined, if we combine all of that work, right, that becomes an entire workflow which is like end-to-end everything. Okay, so every node has an input, right, and send an output, right? It also may be in some cases that you don't want to send an output. That also we handle in certain workflows, right? Because sometimes we want to filter, like some kind of a data is coming in and we want to filter that data out, right, based on certain condition. Okay, in that case, that node will not send out an output. So it will be sort of the data will be dropped at that node itself, and it will not go beyond because it will be filtered out, right? So I'll explain all these use cases as we keep going ahead, right? Now again, we have bunch of ways to visualize it, and we can click JSON and we see the exact same data, right? Exact same JSON. We are observing the exact same JSON that was there within our chat trigger node, right? So that tells that chat trigger node received some data and it just sent it out, right, to this particular edit field node. Let me make you visualize it again. So this chat field node, it received some trigger from us, right? We sent an input and it received some data, right? And this is the data, right? It says output, right? This is the data it received, and the exact same data it just forwarded out, right? As we can see, right? So these two things, right? From here there is an arrow. You see there is an arrow pointing towards this node. That means it is sending the data, right? It is sending the data to this particular node, right? So that is how sort of data flows, right? Flows from one node to another node, right? And thus creating a chain of nodes within the workflow. And by the way, due to this flow nature of this thing, it is also called flowgramming, right? So programming, right? Flow plus programming becomes flowgramming. And there's a very popular guy who is like the official N8N guy, and he has contributed a lot in building this this N8N, and he calls himself the flowgrammer, and he is the OG, right? Original flowgrammer. So if you are building workflows, if you use N8N for building your workflows, you can also sort of title yourself as a flowgrammer, right? So you're building programs using these kind of flows, right? Data flow from one node to another node, data flows, right? So it's a flow, it's a flowgram, and you become a flowgrammer, right? It's some sort of a very specific N8N thing, which is going around in the internet. Anyways, so So if you see this node, we have an input and then we have also an output. Now right now we have not defined anything that this edit field node should do. That is why it is not giving any output, right? Now of course I have a plan to cover each and every node in detail, right? But I'm not gonna do that in this live stream. But because we have used this edit field node, I'm going to explain a little bit about this node. So our goal would be now that we have received this input, right? We want to send something out, right? This output, you see, we want to send something out because right now it is empty, right? If you see the JSON here, this JSON is empty. That means we are receiving this input, right? But in the output, we are getting empty JSON, right? And in most of the cases, we don't want that. We want something to be output, right? So let's try to do that. Okay. So this is the edit field node. Okay, what it does in a very simple way. If whatever the JSON it receives, right, whatever the data it receives, you can manipulate that data, right? You can create a completely new object with the values from this data, right? Or you can just reuse the same object and change it a little bit and produce an output of it, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to create a completely new data, right, using this edit field node, and we'll take some part of the input data there. Okay. So by the way, guys who are connected with me live, if you have any question, any doubt, you can always use the chat window and ask your questions, and I'll try to respond to you. Okay. All right. So in this set field, I'm going to click on this add field button, right? As I highlight here, this add field button. Ignore this mode for now, manual mapping, right? If it is not in manual mapping mode for you, you can change it to manual mapping and then click on add field. Okay. So when we click on add field here, right, the UI changed. Okay. The UI changed. But actually this UI is also trying to tell us what we need to do here, right? So it says fields to set, okay, and then there is a name, an input, and there is some sort of a drop down, and then there is a value, right, of it. Okay. Now those who already works with the JSON object, they know the object has a name and a value pair, right? Every JSON object has a name and a value pair. Okay. So that is what it is asking us that you can create here, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to give a value for this name, okay, and I'm going to call it message, right? And this value, right, this value I want to use the one which was sent over the chat. Okay. And let me show you how we do it. As I said, as I told you earlier, that this information about this chat input key for this object, right, we are going to use this information to get the value that we have sent, or the associated value here, right? I can simply hold it and drop it in this input. Okay. As soon as I drop it, you see there is some, again the UI changes, right? And we see something like an expression, right? Those of you who work with Excel can also understand, right? So there are expressions like in an Excel cell, right? Formula, right? An Excel has a formula. So this is like a formula. Okay. Now this formula, right? It basically, from this particular JSON object, it is retrieving the chat input key, right? It is retrieving so it says $JSON.chat input, and it is then closed inside these curly brackets. Okay. And you can also see the result here, which says hi. That means when we evaluate this expression, right, the result is hi, which is this particular value against this key. Again guys, if any of you is connected with me live and you have any question, please use the chat window to ask it and I'll try to respond. Okay, and those of you who are watching it later as a recorded, you can drop your question as a comment on YouTube and I'll try to respond over that. Okay, so we have now we have this message as a name, and the value is this value of the chat input. Okay, now let's test this out, right? By the way, with just this thing, I have created a JSON object with one key, right? A message, and it will have a value that we are receiving within the input on this chat message. Okay, and to test out how it will work, right? To test out if it is working as per expectation, we have this button called execute step. Okay, what this button does, that the particular node that you are sort of debugging or you're working on, if you want to test the working of that node, you can click this execute step button. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to click execute step, and the expectation is the output here, right? This output JSON object will change. Okay, so let's click on this button, and we saw a little bit of loading symbol there. That means the node was actually, you know, doing some work, right? It was executing it, and then eventually we received another output JSON, right? Now see, we have sort of this node, right, which is receiving some input, and then we did perform some sort of a processing or some sort of a change here, right? And then due to that processing, we received some output, right, which could be different from the input, or which could in some cases be same from the input, or which could be like a modified version of the input, right? But so this way, right, I can go back. Okay, I can go back, and if I click again, I see this same thing is still there. So it is saved, right? This node, whatever change we do, it remains saved. Now let's try another thing. Okay, so I want to now completely start from scratch. I want to again trigger this workflow. By the way, we already have got a very basic minimal N8N workflow in front of us right now, right? It as like a basic version of the minimal version of a workflow, it is there. Okay, so to completely clear it out, there is this reset chat session button. Okay, this with the arrow, circle arrow. I'm going to click this, and it has completely cleaned out our everything, right? All the data of each and every node, our chat, everything is completely cleared out, right? And I want to test this entire workflow again, and of course the changes which I have done to this node, right, I'm hoping that it will do accordingly, right? So let's put another message, right? Welcome. Okay, and again I will send it, and you'll see once I press this send button, the whole workflow will trigger. Each and every node will get triggered, right? And eventually we will get some output. Okay, same thing happened, right? Same thing happened. Okay, but this time there is one difference here, right? And the difference is this thing. Okay, earlier when we triggered that node, right, we did not receive anything. So it had actually sort of a message which was nothing like this, which was like a no response received, something like that. So those of you who are confused, you can like scroll back this stream a little bit. You can rewind this stream, right, and you can see what was that message, and then come back to the live here, right? But where this message is coming from? Okay, now let's again see what happened within our workflow step by step, right? Again, to see when this node got triggered, what happened within this node, I double clicked it, right? And I can see again the data that this node received, right? The JSON data. Okay, and it has again this chat input with the message that I just sent it, welcome, right? Now I'm going to move to my next node, and I'm going to again double click it, and I'm going to open this. Now the changes which I did are still there, right? And again, we can see the input that this node received. This node received the same input that the chat input sent as output, right? And then it changed, or it created a completely new object, right? With only a single key message and the value welcome, which we picked it from here based on this expression $json.chat input, right? So this output, right? This output of the last node. So this node is the last node in our workflow, right? So we have two nodes. One is a trigger node, and then we have another node, which is this edit field node. And this is also the last node of this workflow. So whatever was the output of this last node has automatically become the response of this workflow. Okay, so whatever was the output coming from the last node in our chain, right, has become by itself, by default, has become the response of this workflow, and that's what we have received as the response of this chat message, right? So if I send again, how are you, right, and send, then see, it is sending me the response back, how are you, right? Basically it is taking the same thing which I'm sending it, and it is just mirroring it back, right? So this way we have a very, very basic workflow. Okay, now let's go one step ahead, right? So we still have a plus sign, right? That means when we click here, we can still do a lot more here, right? We can still do few more things. Okay, so what else can we do? There's this button called AI, right? So by the way, this itself, when I click it, it will not add anything because there is an arrow. That means there are things which are inside it, right? So agent, summarizer, search, document, etc., right? So there are a whole host of things which are AI specific that we can add within our workflow, right? We can also do something like send the data to save in a Google sheet, right? And we can also merge it, break it, like do bunch of things here. Okay, so let's try a AI step, right? Now this step I cannot explain everything in detail now, okay, because right now I just want to demonstrate some feature here, but definitely I'll show you how I build it, everything step by step, like in every details in a bit later. Okay, so what I'm gonna add here is called a basic LLM chain, right? So I'll click it, and we got this basic LLM chain here. Okay, and let's close it. So just to show you, as soon as I click the plus on that, as soon as I click that basic LLM chain, a new node got added, and which has got automatically connected with this our previous edit field node, right? So our chain of this workflow is progressing, right? So as you can imagine, some data will come from this, will flow to this, will flow to this, right? Now here, as I said, I'll again explain all of these in very, very detailed step by step, but not now. Now I'm just trying to sort of demonstrate what a basic workflow looks like, right? I'm going to add a model here, okay, and I'm going to add a Google Vertex chat model, right? So basically, let me show again. So there are two plus signs now, okay? So to help us remove the confusion, they have already labeled this side of branch, right? So there are like two branches out of it. So this branch they have already labeled as a model, and they have also made a star. They have also added a red color star symbol here. Okay, that means to execute this work, this particular node, this need to have some value, right? Right now it is empty. Okay, right now there is no model attached to it, so it need to have some model there for this node to act properly. That's why you see this symbol here which says issue no node connected to required input model. So this model is another branch which is a required branch, and we need to add some model to it. So N8N is intelligent in that way that if we click plus to add a node, it gives us these options to select a node that we want to add. However, if we click plus here, then it directly shows us the models that are available. And by the way, these are AI or LLM models that are available within N8N that we can use. Okay, so we have all these. We have Anthropic, we have OpenAI's model like GPT-4, 3.5, and then we have also Google's models, right? So I'm going to connect it with the Google Vertex chat model, right? So I'll click here. Okay, now I'll explain all these things in more details step by step, but for the time being, please bear with me because I'm just trying to demonstrate how a workflow is, right? So let's ignore everything else. Okay, and we have like the name of a model here, right? Let it be, let me quickly select my project from the list. Okay, I've selected a project. Let me change this to 2.5 flash, right? And okay, right? So now if we see our this UI, for this basic LLM chain node, we have got this Google Vertex chat model connected here, right? Now this AI, this has sort of become a brain, right? Because AI has intelligence. So this has become a brain for this particular node. Okay, so what this node will do, right? For that, we have to tell in this node what I want you to do. Okay, so if there are developers among you who have already used programmatically using LangChain or some Python libraries to build your own sort of LLM apps, right? So we have to give something called system prompt to the LLM, right? So we are actually giving the system prompt to this LLM now. Okay, by the way, let me quickly do some changes, and again I'll explain it to you in more details what these changes are, right? But not now. I'm trying to show you something. Okay, so I'm going to give it a system prompt, and a very simple one, right? User is sending this message, please respond to it accordingly in a friendly tone. Okay, so this is a very, very basic prompt, a system prompt which I have added, right? User is sending this message, please respond to it accordingly in a friendly tone. And which message? The message that we have received as an input to this node, right? So there is some setting which I did there. Again, I'll definitely come back to it in more details step by step, but not now, because right now I'm just trying to demonstrate how a workflow is. Okay, and again you see this orange execute button. So as I see, I think this particular node is pretty good. I have added it, I have added the Gemini model to it, I have given the system prompt to it, right? So I think I'm good to test it. Okay, let me execute the step. Okay, now the Gemini model will be receiving the data. Okay, So because we have passed the system prompt and we also passed the user message, so the Gemini model, the Flash model that we have connected to it, right? Let me show you out here, right? This Gemini Vertex chat model. Now this model is receiving this system prompt along with the message that is received from the user. Okay, and we have received another output here, right? And this output has is again an object, right? And it has its own some property. It has its own key, which is text, and then there is some very different kind of a message coming, which is not being sent from anywhere, rather my chat input or anything, right? Where it is coming from? It is coming from the Google Gemini Flash 2.5 model, right? That is receiving this message, and based on my system prompt, right? This is my system prompt. User is sending this message. Please respond to it accordingly in a friendly tone. Okay, and it is receiving the message and creating a friendly tone response and sending it as an output. Excuse me. I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. How are you doing today? Right? So this is a response, a friendly response generated from Google Gemini Flash model based on what I sent here. Right? Now let's try to test your reasoning. Right? So just now I told whatever is the last node of our workflow, right? The output of the last node of our workflow, right, becomes the final output or the final response of our entire N8N workflow, right? So I hope you remember it because I had just explained it to you, right? So again, using that circle clear icon, I have cleaned up my entire N8N workspace, right? Now again, I'm going to send it a chat message. Okay, so let me send it chat message. Hi, are we good to go with the meeting? Okay, again, I'm sort of role playing with the AI. You know, I'm just trying to test how the AI will respond, right? So that's why I'm just coming up with some sort of a role based messages like, hi, are we good to go with the meeting? Like some sort of a colleagues, office colleagues or manager, and those will talk with each other, right? So I'm trying to just test out the responses generated from Gemini. So I'm clicking send now. Okay, now see here, you can see very clearly because there is a delay, and you see there is some sort of a icon there, right? Which means that okay, we'll come to that. So okay, it's a good thing. Now we actually see an error. Remember what I told you? I told that when the nodes get executed, as they get success, they turns into green, right? But when there is some error, then they will not turn to green. Now looking at this particular node graph where some nodes are green and one node has become red with some exclamation sign, right? It tells something to us, right? What it is telling is that all these nodes, including this our Google chat model, all these had got executed successfully, but something messed up within this node, right? So that's why we could not receive a final output, rather we received an error message. Okay, so now we know there is a node which has a problem, so we have to debug it, right? We have to find that problem and we have to fix that problem. Okay, so again, to find the problem within that node, we are going to double click it, right? A bunch of things are happening here. Okay, let's see what has happened. So we have the output, right? Now see, the output side of it has changed this time because this has turned into the error UI, and it is showing the error message to us, right? And also to help us debug it, it has also shared the logs with us, like what all logs were generated for this one, right? So let's see what happened with the error. Cannot read properties of undefined reading message. Okay. And let's see the log where input was user is sending this a message. Please respond to it accordingly in a friendly tone. Human. Hi, are we going to go with the meeting? And then there was no output. Right? Okay. So the problem is our Google Gemini model did not send any output. Okay. See, this is the problem. If we see the response again, okay, what I did, let me quickly explain. Now, after reading this particular log, right, I understood that there was no output produced here. Okay. And also I can see this error, and it says read properties of undefined reading message. The thing is, those of you who has worked with JavaScript, you know what is undefined, right? Undefined is when you are trying to read the property, right, which does not exist at all. That's when JavaScript throws this undefined error, right? So we are using some of our pre-existing coding knowledge to debug this issue, right? So the issue which I have understood and identified is Google Vertex chat model has received an input but has not given us any output here, right? So to check that, what we're going to do is we're going to double click our Google chat node, right? Gemini chat node, model node, right? And the output that we see is here, right? And see the output is empty, right? Generations, and it's a completely empty. There is nothing in this output, right? Ideally, there should have been something, right? And let me show you how that output might have looked. Okay, so I want to see now the past executions that we have done within this workflow. Guys, again, if I'm going a little bit too fast, right, please, we are connected live, right? This is a live stream. You can always use our chat window and ask me any question, share any thoughts, ideas, right? Or just chat in general with me, right? And I will try to respond to that. Okay, but let's to see all the executions, all the previous executions, sort of a history of this workflow, what all what all executions have occurred, right, within this workflow. There is this tab, right? So right now we have this editor selected. Beside this, there is this execution tab, right? When we click on it, we are actually seeing all the executions of this workflow. So it tells how long that execution ran, right? It took 34 milliseconds, at what time it ran. Okay, so, and also it gives us the same workflow graph at the time the execution was running, right? It's not the graph that we have right now. It is the graph at the time when execution was running. Okay, so you remember when I initially started building this workflow, I had triggered my first workflow with just these two nodes, right? Which is what is visible. But if I check my latest success workflow, you'll see the graph will change, and the graph will show a different one, which is the latest one at the time that execution ran, right? So some people do get confused that they click and the graph changes. The graph changes because the graph shows at the time the execution ran, okay, how your workflow was designed, right? Now, to show you what kind of output is expected from Gemini chat model, I have gone back to my successful execution, which was the last one, and I'm going to double click. So within this sort of execution window where we are seeing like the history of the executions, also we can sort of investigate each and every node, the data inside it, and so on, right? So I'll double click this Google Vertex chat this node, right? Now you see when I clicked here, right, you see there is within this generations there is some object here which has this text value, right? And this is what was missing in our previous failed execution. Okay, if I show you the previous failed execution, right? You see, there is nothing. It's completely empty, as if Gemini did not even responded anything, right? It just sort of blanked out, right? So what I think is, this is not like a flow error, it's some issue with the Gemini chat model. So what I'm thinking, it is just one-off issue, and if we try again, it might work, right? So there is no specific change that we need to do to fix this error, right? Now, you guys should understand that whenever you're building the workflow, it can fail, right? And see, like in this case, it has not failed due to any issue within this workflow. It has failed because simply Gemini, this connected model, did not produce any output at all, right? So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to again clear this workflow completely and then try to run it again. Okay, right? So I guess the message which I sent it previously in a role play way didn't work out quite well. So let me try another message and let's see how it will do. Okay, are you free this noon for lunch? Okay, let's try another role play and let's see this time if Gemini chat model is gonna respond, or again it will just simply blank out. Okay, and again the same error happened. I'm not sure. Let's see again. Hi, how are you? Just is it happening a lot? Let's try to debug it. Okay, great. So Gemini has in our this case have become a little bit moody, right? Sometimes it is choosing to respond and sometimes it is not even responding at all. For example, my earlier attempt to sort of a role play, like, are you this noon for lunch? And by the way, my message was not spelled correctly, so it has not responded anything. It just blanked out, right? But when I sent hi, how are you, then it says, hi there, I'm doing well, thank you for asking, right? How are you today? So it is indeed responding in a friendly tone for my messages. So you see, right now what we have got is a N8N workflow, a pretty a standard workflow, right? It is using AI for interpreting the input that you're sending to it. Then AI is taking that as an input. We have given a system prompt. Using this system prompt, it is generating some output message, and that is the message that we are receiving out as an output within this chat window, right? Okay, so let me ask another question and let's try to see, understand if it is good enough or not. Okay, is the weather nice? Let's see if it chooses to again respond or it will just blank out. Again, it's like a role play, so I think every time when I'm attempting to, okay, oh great, so this time it has actually responded. So again, it is very, very moody, right? It sometimes chooses to respond, sometimes it goes along with the role play, it responds well, sometimes it just doesn't respond at all. Anyways, oh, I wish I could tell you directly. As an AI, I don't. Okay, and I guess there is some token drop happened, right? I guess like some sort of a output tokens got dropped. So I don't know what weird thing is happening there, but anyways. So as you can see, we have a pretty standard, a working workflow, right? An N8N workflow. And so I think for today's this live stream, I would just leave it at that, right? But in my subsequent N8N workflow live streams, we're gonna build more workflows, and this is like a very basic workflow where my intention was for the guys who have just started watching my channel, right, who maybe don't know much about N8N, right? So I just wanted to help you understand the basics of N8N, right? How to build a workflow, how it works, and things like that, right? And again, if you have any questions, any thoughts, any doubts, you can always ask those in this chat window, and I can, I'm connected live with you, and I will respond to it, right? So that is all for today's this automation workshop, building N8N workflows, and I hope you guys are liking what I'm doing here, right? And please drop comments on my video so that I can know if you're liking it or if you're not liking it, and if you have any sort of questions. So my plan is to keep doing these live streams every day, alternate days for vibe coding and alternate days for building these workflows, right? 2 times each in a week. So 2 times vibe coding in a week and 2 times automation workshops every week, right? And I hope you guys are enjoying what I'm doing, and please stay connected, and just have a great time and enjoy, right? All right, signing off. Have a great day, guys, or rather good night.